Okay, so I'm Roger Blow, and welcome to the launch of issue 13. We've got some interesting poetry for you tonight, a selection of what is available in the actual issue. So if you want to see the rest and you haven't, then you have to buy a copy, which is available from Clay Anchor Press. I'll put the link in later on, or looking across the screen. I think most people probably have bought a copy. So if you could mute yourself, unless you're actually reading poem, that would be brilliant. Apart from when we ask you to unmute, in which case you can do that, and wildly applaud as well at the same time, with your other hand entering good comments into the chat. So I'll hand over to Mary and let her get the thing kicked off.
Roger and Mary, could I ask a favour?
Yep.
When you said about people commenting in the chat,
Yeah.
would they maybe not do that while someone is reading because it's quite distracting?
You can always turn the chat off.
Yeah.
There's a little X at the top of the thing so that you
Okay.
are distracted.
I can do that. Thank you.
Okay. And I think it's Diana first, isn't
Diana,
it?
yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Lovely to see you all. This is my first appearance as a new editor for this rather wonderful magazine, so I'm delighted to be here. Also, slightly trepidatious about stepping into Vanessa's shoes. Vanessa, unfortunately, isn't able to be here this evening, but I know Mary's going to say something about her a bit later. The theme, as you know, for this issue was silence, and the submission, it seems to be a theme that really occasions some very creative responses. So submissions came in all sorts of guises. And what quickly became apparent was that the quality of silence is very varied, actually. So there was a group of poems and poets that really seemed to view silence as something to be longed for, something contemplative, something peaceful, perhaps. There was another group of poems that defined silence more by an absence, the absence of sound, or these were often poems that had an environmental or an ecological bent to them. And then, and this is a very broad sort of description, there was a third group of poems that saw silence as something rather more secretive, something more to do with withholding, something much more problematic. And interestingly, of course, these were a group of poems that tended to be about relationships and especially difficult family dynamics. So, of course, we're aware that asking people to write words about silence and asking you to read words about silence has an inherent contradiction to it. And that was a contradiction not lost on a number of the submissions. Indeed, you'll see that at least a couple of the poems reference John Cage's work, 4 minutes, 33 seconds, which of course is about silence or not silence. So anyway, as you will all have, or most of you have seen a copy of the magazine, you'll know that we've got Mary's interview with Mimi Calvetti. We've got a personal view from Tim Relf on comparing journalism and poetry. We've got Suzanne Conway's essay on Sharon Olds and a cornucopia of reviews. So lots of things going on. And actually, for those of you who've seen it, it does look rather beautiful, I think. I mean, I know I'm biased, but it's rather lovely. So, to the business of the evening, the poems. As Roger said, we're going to introduce the readers in groups of 2 or 3. And I'm going to start by introducing Isabella Mead, first of all. I'll introduce Isabella Mead and Neil Douglas together and read a brief biography, and then they'll read their poems. So Isabella Mead is our featured poet this issue. And you can access a recording of her reading her. She's going to read 2 poems, and you can access a recording of these by using the QR code in the current issue. So Isabella has appeared in Magma, Dyslexia, The Telegraph, Anna Kappa Review, Ink, Sweat and Tears, and Poetry News. She's won 9 poetry competitions, including Wells, Bedford, Julian Lennon, Kroll and Ver, and was a Brotherton finalist. Her debut pamphlet, Dear Rwanda, was published in 2023 with Live Canon. And Neil Douglas, who will read after her. Neil worked as a GP and community paediatrician in London's East End. He's appeared in Ambit, The North, Perverse and The Alchemy Spoon previously. And he recently graduated with an MA in Creative and Life Writing from Goldsmiths. So I'll hand over now to Isabella.
Well, hi everyone. It's really lovely to be a part of this. So thank you so much, Alchemy Spoon. So my 2 poems are really new poems. In April, just before I started my new job, I had a month's residency at an art centre in Svalbard, which I can really recommend. They do an open call if people are interested. It's called Spitsbergen Art Centre. And just like 2 weeks before, I'd had my eggs frozen. So I was really thinking about ice, and ice is melting on Svalbard, obviously, the glaciers. And I really don't want ice to melt right now. So I was thinking of those parallels. And these are the first 2. I wrote about 8 poems on that residency, and these are the 2 that have been published. So I'm really happy to have these published. So thank you so much. And it was because I met Mary at the poetry school, and she told me about the theme silence, which I thought fit it really nicely. So thank you, Mary. Cool. Okay, so the first one is called Stars. I watch the scan side on as she clicks on each follicle, as if mapping the stance of a mythical god across a rural night sky. Soon, bright cells will have their chance to rest on ice and gradually blink themselves to sleep. This valley too, for now, seems at peace, with its cliffside crevices where ptarmigans slumber in their custom-made snow holes, and, wider, the mountains surround and encompass the tundra, where reindeer, unaware of all this, tug at tussocks of cotton grass, dotted squatly on the snow like inverted stars. And my second one is called cryopreservation, which is the process of freezing eggs. And you've got a really nice picture next to it. I love it. Okay, so this is called cryopreservation. It is between time. The sky no longer dances green and blue and rose, and yet the snow bunting, the only songbird on Svalbard, has not yet returned. It is between time. The snow and frost and mist and ice persist despite the lengthening light, and all is whiteness and silence and pause. It is between time. Our embryos rest. Another April, perhaps, will remember and wish we could go back to this, the possibility of possibility, immovable ice, whiteness and silence, tiny lives. We will not lean in then to hear how silence is comprised of cries. Cry of the kittiwakes skating the waves, cry of the fulmar riding the wind, cry of the white fox on the snow-blown hills, cry of the ptarmigan circling the cliff, cry of the polar bear as the glacier creeps and descends to sea, cry of the seeds deep in the seed vault, remembering homes lost to fire and flood and out of reach. Cry of the water absorbing the light, cry of the cryosphere, cry of the ice. We will only hold between time close. We will not search the whiteness for tinted waves of green and blue and every shade of red, crimson, vermilion, scarlet, rose. Thank you, guys.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for including me in this episode of Alchemy Spoon. I'm very pleased to be here. My poem is Tacit, after 4 minutes 33 seconds by John Cage. They missed the point. There's no such thing as silence. The mute poet, for instance, hears constant skull-bound voices. What they thought was silence was a metaphor for Vaseline, because they didn't know how to listen. And a luscious-lipped giraffe in the room was full of accidental sounds. Eyelashes batting flock wallpaper above the bed. You could hear the wind stirring outside, clouds humming like cotton wool in a suitcase. Raindrops began pattering the roof, gutters gargling songs from Kiss Me Kate. People made interesting sounds, hiccups, sighs, prosthetic limbs, as they talked or walked out, scraping themselves against the marble floor, the asphalt in the car park. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And now I'm going to introduce Leslie Kerwin and Heidi Beck. Is Leslie here? We have Leslie here?
I haven't spotted her.
Oh, okay. So Heidi, I'll just introduce you now. So Heidi emigrated to the UK from the USA in 1998 and now lives between Bristol and Portugal. She's had poems published in Magma, Rialto, Poetry Island Review, Butcher's Dog, The Alchemy Spoon previously, Finnish Preachers, and is published online at the Friday Poem. Heidi.
Thank you. It's great to be here tonight. Being in Portugal, I don't get to many poetry events now because not so many are on Zoom anymore, but it's lovely to be in the Alchemy Spoon again. And I think my poem is one of those that falls in the category, I think the third category of the dangers of silence and silencing. The childminder's soap. Surely, if my father had used the soap, he would never have sent us there. If he'd noticed the cracks that were always black, how it felt so wrong to hold. If he'd had to lift the soap from the edge of the sink, from that soupy brown sludge, then maybe we wouldn't have gone. Surely, if he'd known there were marbles in the soap, he would not have brought us there. The harder you rubbed, the faster they'd show. That's what my friend said, holding the soap, suds running slick down her arms. She was the childminder's daughter. She must have known. Surely he would never have made us go if he knew the childminder's boys had their mouths washed out with soap when they got caught using dirty words like cock and dick and suck. Soap and marbles and dirty words should not be in your mouth. Your mouth will foam. Surely it would have been different. Surely he would have taken us home. If I could have dragged him to the bathroom to show, if I could have said about the dirty things that should not be in your mouth, the things that make you choke. If I could have said about the soap.
Well, that was absolutely wonderful. So thank you so much, Diana, Izzy, Neil, and Heidi, and sorry to miss out on Leslie, but that was a terrific start. And I'm now delighted to be able to hand the microphone over to our next two poets. First up, we'll have Louise Longson. Louise's poems are widely published in anthologies, and she's been commended by Hedgehog Press and won the Carrie Ann Flickinger Memorial Prize. She has pamphlets hanging fire with Greek and songs from the Witch Bottle from Alien Buddha Press. Louise will be followed by Richard Skinner. Richard has published 7 poetry books. The most recent from Salt is White Noise Machine. He's director of the fiction program at Faber and runs the Press Vanguard editions and is editor of 14 magazine. We look forward very much to hearing both your poems.
Thank you. Hello, it's lovely to be here. It's my first time with Alchemy Spoon, so it's a real privilege. Slightly scared listening to the other poets' publications and accolades. So my poem's very much in the second category of environmental poetry, and in March 2022, as we were sort of starting to recover from COVID, I saw a snippet on news that Gwynedd Island, which is a tiny little island off the coast of the Highlands, kind of in between Gairloch and Ullapool, had caught fire in the night. People had seen it from the mainland and described it as apocalyptic. And I looked into the history of the island. It's tiny, it's a mile and a quarter long, 5/8 of a mile wide, so 2 kilometers and 1 kilometer for if you do the new money. And it in 1942, Gwynedd was made into what they call a sacrifice zone by the Ministry of Defence, which was a phrase that kind of hit me. And it was used for chemical weapons testing, particularly anthrax testing. And its history is therefore quite shocking. And the fact that it had supposedly been decontaminated in 1990 after a campaign by a number of people who referred to themselves as Dark Harvest started in 1981. And the fact that it then went up in flames seemed to me like a perfect little metaphor of kind of what was happening in the world in general. So this is Dark Harvest 2022. For Gwynedd Island, former MOD biological warfare testing ground. This is not the first time the island has been baptized by fire. Seeds, spores, germs lay deep in the black soil's memory of that tiny moment of white powder clouds pluming on the wind, releasing death, of blown out carcasses incinerated or buried under the rubble of blown up cliffs by the shores, of leaving the island alone to breed and brood, preserved in spite of formaldehyde washes and sprays of seawater. Smoke drifts across the channel as the heather burns. Scorched skies cover an appalled dawn with a shroud made of ghosts. All that is left now are stripped remains of trees standing sentry on the shoreline, naked skeletons broken in waves of flame, the screaming of birds, the silence.
Hi, everyone. So thank you very much to Mary, whom I know, for the invitation and for accepting my poem, but also to Roger and Diana and Vanessa. My poem is called Silence, and it's from a forthcoming collection of poems, each of which is inspired by a movie. And this poem is inspired by the Martin Scorsese movie called Silence, which didn't do very much when it came out, but which I think is sort of a slow burning masterpiece. And it's about two Jesuit priests who are sent to Japan in the 17th century to search for another Jesuit priest who's gone missing. And I won't say any more about the film than that. That's all you need to know if you want to watch it. And so this poem is in two parts. It's written from the point of view of the two priests, and it's in their voices. So this is called Silence. Japan, 17th century. Father Garupe. To dream, to seek the unknown, to walk the green grass, the blue sky, to see flames burning on the water, to look for what is beautiful to the ends of the earth is its own reward. A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? Give up the earth to gain a heaven. Part 2, Father Rodriguez. Silence is the ground on which we stand. We build ourselves on white, on silence and stillness. We do not have belief, but we do seek faith. Belief is clinging on, but faith is letting go. We must seek the enigma of conscience, of spirit. We must find the crucible of faith.
Thank you so much, Louise and Richard. That was wonderful. Now we're going to hear from Carol Bromley, Benedict Newbury, and Dylan Jacks. So in that order, Carol Bromley is a York-based poet with 3 collections from Smith Doorstop and 1 with Valley Press. She's won a number of prizes, including Bridport and the Hamish Canham Award and the 2022 Caterpillar Prize for Children's Poetry. Carol will be followed by Benedict Newbury, whose poems have appeared in Ambit, Magma, The North, Finnish Creatures, The Morning Star, and many others. Benedict was a Magma board member and production manager 2017 to 2020 and lead editor for Magma 74. He's been awarded 2 metal residencies and also makes poetry films. Finally, for this section, we'll hear from Dylan Jacks. Dylan is a queer disabled writer living in Sussex. They've been shortlisted and placed in many competitions over the past 3 years. This year, they won the Wolverhampton Poetry Competition and the Brotherton Prize and are working on their debut collection. So it's over to you, Carol, Benedict and Dylan.
Thank you very much, Mary. I'm delighted to be back in the Alchemy Spoon. My poem, I guess, is about being silenced, really, about having your words stolen. And it's called Borrowings. When someone steals my words, or even my ideas, I am minded of those boys I taught, I could tell you their names, only I won't. For all I know, they could be out there Googling my name, who bought the same pen as me, same notebook, same Arden edition of Macbeth, who I'd meet at the end of my road, sitting on a wall, as if waiting for me. Of course, they always said it was quite by chance. And did I live here? But when someone steals my words, a title, say, a first line, the structure of a poem, I want to say, hang on, you can't do that. But maybe they can. Maybe that's how it works. It's like the time I found a tile online with my poem on it, just a little poem about my sister, but no one had asked permission, and I wondered if I should order enough to tile my bathroom, then every time I showered, I'd remember how I took her doll when she was at that party and gave it a bath, and how, afterwards, it couldn't say Mama.
Hello, I'm really pleased to be in this edition of Alchemy Spoon. This is my second appearance, so very pleased. So thank you very much to the editors. This is a very short poem. I think it's falling into the third category. My mum went to a convent school in Manchester and held a lifelong disdain for what she termed the nunnoids, and generally the Catholic Church. But she always, until she died, spoke to her own God that had very little truck with formal religion that was around her. So this is called Mum's Still There. Crude voice boxes were startled into life by the minister's electronic piano, the Sunday setup on the patio of the nursing home. We retreated, settled by the trees, watched the flock follow on best it could, overtaking, falling behind, murmuring or bellowing another tune or no tune at all. In the space left in the garden, beyond the final chord, in her chair, as the minister began to talk, Mum rolled her eyes.
Hi everyone. Thank you for publishing my poem and for inviting me here. It's good to be here. My poem is called Rooting. Soil contains Mycobacterium vaccae, a natural antidepressant, and boy do I feel good, patting the earth where I've buried father's silence in a neat row next to mother's shame. I dip my hand cups into a vat of rainwater and trickle it over the freshly entombed seedlings. It's an heirloom variety. The bitterness will pull mouths into grimace for generations to come. I still have a dozen jars of last year's crop, preserved like bad memories, hidden behind the baked bean tins. At family gatherings, we spoon the contents softened from floating in their glass wombs onto plates, push them around the mouth with our tongues like we do with the body of Christ on Sundays. Mine sits in the fleshy nest of my cheek as I answer another question beginning with why. I eventually managed to swallow the globule, rinsing it down with a mouthful of wine, the lump rooting in my throat. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Excellent set of poems we're having. So now we're moving on to the final three of our poets, who I'll introduce as a block of three. The first is Emma Jones. Emma wins the prize for one of the most enigmatic bios in the issue. It's sort of like a good poem. You think there's a lot more behind it than the words tell you. Emma says that she drifted from job to job for most of her life, started out as a lawyer, moved to become a piano tuner, and then a very short stint as an English teacher. She lives in Felixstowe, has been published in Pomegranate, London, Propel, Strix, and the North. And Then the second one of this block is Judith Wozniak. Judith's one of the MA graduates from the Writing Poetry course. And her poems have appeared in London Grip, The Alchemy Spoon, Frogmore Papers. She won first prize in the Hippocrates competition 2020, and a pamphlet, Patient Watching, was published by Hedgehog in January, and Case Notes in 2024. And then our final poet of the evening is Barbara Barnes. Barbara's poems have appeared in Poetry London, Under the Radar, Butcher's Dog, Arc Poetry, Black Iris, and The Alchemy Spoon. And her first collection, Houndmouth, won the Live Canon Collection competition, was published in 2022. So I'll now hand over to our final three poets, starting off with Emma.
Hello everyone, it's lovely to be here. Some really beautiful poems. Been really enjoying this theme and everyone's very personal kind of take on it. This is my poem. It's called The Cold Dissection of a Friendship. For a year, I shared a house with a medic named Tiffany. Me, her, and three guys in a terrace off Iffley Road. The guys all adored her blonde hair and tight running kit. Even her tone-deaf singing became one of her many assets. Although we were both 19, Tiffany seemed much older. She could tie a tourniquet and stem your blood flow at a moment's notice. Above all, she'd seen and cut a few dead bodies. I was going to be a lawyer, but no one really believed that. By the time I surfaced from bed, Tiff had attended 3 lectures and rode the frozen Isis. Her dad worked for Glaxo, and her friends were called Cat or Flo and hung around our kitchen discussing pharmacology. That was the year one of her friends died. Maybe Tiffany retreated into her room, played Celine Dion a little too loudly, and ate her steamed chicken in silence. But for me to knock on her door, it's easier to picture a cadaver asking if she needed to chat.
Thank you so much for choosing my poem to go in this beautiful magazine. And I've loved listening to all the other poems. This one's called Secrets and Silence, after the picture by Johannes Vermeer called The Lace Maker. Would you believe, in a former life, I once went on a lace making course, God knows why, and I produced something about that big. So I got an idea of how intricate it was. Secrets and Silence, after the lace maker Johannes Vermeer. I know it pleases my father to see me bowed over a new intricate pattern pinned to my lace-making pillow, while he reads his Bible. The church bell chimes the hour. Children clatter over courtyard cobbles. My bobbins, wound with the finest flax, tap together as I twist and cross each strand round a pearl-topped pin. Weave the next small motif of braid, half-stitched diamonds, leaf-shaped tallies, trapped in a spider web of threads. Spills of late afternoon sunlight glaze the folds in my saffron dress. I loosen a tendril of hair from my cap, hoping to glimpse him as he passes our window. I keep his letter hidden under the tassel cloth. When my bobbins stop, there is only silence. Thank you.
What an amazing collection of poems. Lastly, I'll read my very small poem about the Grand Canyon, or it's rather about a small flower that grows on the edge of the Grand Canyon. Cliff Rose. You blush the canyon's cheekbone, sweeten the dare for all who dance near its drop. The footloose scrabble and rip you. Palest of hues, you never frighten those you cradle. Boiled, you make for gentle sipping. Burned, you bloom again, at home on a knife edge. Wise bitter brush, wild echo whoops dash the iron-reddened walls. You grow your greening claim, this place that you make quiet.
That was altogether wonderful. Thank you, all you poets, for a fantastic, fantastic reading. I wonder if we could just very briefly unmute ourselves and give a quick round of applause, and then I've just got something to say following that. Oh, and so has Roger. So everyone unmute and let's give an applause to all these wonderful poets. Thank you. And so now the next bit I'm going to do is a farewell to Vanessa. Unfortunately, Vanessa can't be here, but she has been such a valued member of the Alchemy Spoon since its foundation that I thought I'd just say a few words that she'll be able to see when it's in the recording. So it was in November 2019, shortly before COVID struck, and just after we had finished our poetry school MA, that Roger, Vanessa and I hit upon the idea of starting what was going to become the Alchemy Spoon. Roger had just won the Poetry London Prize. Vanessa and I went to the prize-giving reading to hear him and the magazine launch, and with innocent enthusiasm over a glass of red, we discussed the idea of creating our own poetry magazine. Then coronavirus hit. In March, when we were all in lockdown, Vanessa and I received an email from Roger suggesting a new magazine was exactly what we in the poetry world currently needed. Remotely, we exchanged ideas, chose a name, and worked out a formula, deciding upon a slight bias towards people who'd come to poetry following other careers. Roger had been a psychiatrist, I a psychotherapist, and Vanessa was a practicing acupuncturist. And we would run 3 issues a year, each being an editor for one of them. And we had terrific fun, choosing the poems, working up book reviews, discussing themes and other features. 5 years after our initial idea, we celebrate today the launch of issue 13, and we are very sad to have to say goodbye to Vanessa. Vanessa has been a valued and intrinsic part of our team, but running a magazine and keeping it going is a big commitment and takes more time than Vanessa's been able to give. So it's with enormous reluctance and sadness she is retiring, and we must say goodbye to her and to thank her for her humour, her wisdom, her insight and her words. Vanessa is a very hard act to follow, and we're going to miss her input massively, but are lucky that Diana Cant, who has already guest edited the magazine, has agreed to step in, not into Vanessa's shoes, for she has a different shoe style, and will bring her own unique ideas. So as we wish you good luck with your future poetic ventures, Vanessa, and send our thanks and fond farewells to you, we are delighted to welcome Diana to the Alchemy Spoon team. So now over to you, Diana.
Well, I absolutely, Vanessa was a fellow student with us for many years, so I know her well. And I had been I'm conscious of stepping into her shoes. I like the idea of them being a rather different set of shoes. So thank you for that, Mary. And I hope I can do you all justice. And as people have said in the chat, what a wonderful set of poems these were this evening. They were just fantastic, so varied and so alive and so very present. So thank you all. It remains really for me to just announce the theme for next time and the dates, the submission dates for next time. Well, that's easy because the theme is unthemed. There's no theme for the next issue. Whether that makes it easier or not, I'm not sure. I feel quite mixed about that. But anyway, feel free to submit whatever strikes your fancy. And the submission dates are the 1st to the 31st of October, so not long now. So yes, keep them coming in very soon.
Thanks. So an excellent evening. One of the joys of these launches, of course, is that having spent ages with us all reading the poems, we actually hear some of them come to life, and it's fascinating to see the voices added to the words. We also, in this issue, I think I do need to say, we've got some brilliant illustrations. I need to say thank you to Deb Catesby, to Michael Cummins, and to Michael Roberts, who've allowed us to use their illustrations without any fee, in return for a free copy of their own illustration, which is, I guess, a bit of a cheat. But I think it adds a value to the magazine to have such brilliant photographers and painters who are willing to submit their work to us. So that's all for this evening. It's been excellent. I've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll hopefully be inundated in a few days' time by piles and piles of poems coming through the ether, and we'll then spend October looking at them, and then the month after selecting them, and hopefully the Christmas edition will be out this time before Christmas, I hope, particularly as I've got to ship the magazines over from the Isle of Man, and the weather may not be good enough for the ferry to leave with the post. So, but we're aiming for the Christmas edition. So thanks very much. Thank you to everybody who's read. Thanks to everybody who's submitted poems. And thanks to Mary and Diana for co-hosting this. And again, just to add our thanks to Vanessa, who's been a brilliant friend and colleague. So good night. Have a safe trip home, and we'll see you near Christmas.